Alright family, I'm back again, and we're gonna do, it looks like, some background on what their families were like before coming to the earth. They had certain holy days called Nurturers Day, when the women gave birth. From what I could see, Farnell is still in a trance. Her husband's name was Yormitz, and that was Bland's father. He was crushed rescuing somebody that was a foresight being, and that was several decades before he met Shahzah. It was a hermit that he was rescuing in the Tibetan mountains that had been waiting in the opening of his vision cave. Yormitz was telepathic, communicating to Bland. He recognized that the beings were becoming awakened by divine vibrational enlightenment. And this one was very aware of life other than on the surface. He had visited all the corners of the earth and discovered many animals and creatures long thought extinct. It was only when this human being had begun to search of truth, who he was and what was his part in the universe, did Bland make an effort to answer him. So you see, Yormitz made an effort to contact this foresight being, Bland's father. It was only after he realized that he was seeking who he was that he answered him. Okay, so he waited for this one because he was assigned to him. A brilliant and open-minded human being, but his ego stood in the way of common sense sometimes, and he did terrible things to people to obtain knowledge. Yormitz began to ask permission to make first contact with this being, and after receiving it, he visited him. And after he felt the hermit had assumed the change fully, the old man began to telepathically communicate with him easily. Yormitz told him of the story of the rift that would begin the destruction. The old hermit was said to be 130 years old. Yormitz took a team of 6 and a portal ring, and their arrival was ill-timed as a small tremor among the mountain trail upwards towards the hermit's cave shook and dislodged boulders just above the old man's cave entrance. A rain of boulders the size of small Volkswagens rained down upon the visitors. 3 got out of the way just in time, but Yormitz reached for a rock surface to climb up out of the path of a rolling boulder, and he jumped to grab it twice, but he missed. The 3rd time he slipped on gravel, and the boulder kept coming, rolling and bouncing against the path and finally crushing him. The rest of the crew had a hard time convincing the old hermit to go with them. He almost didn't come back because he didn't know anyone except Yormitz, and on board they did their best to talk to the man. He was still feeling lost after the loss of his first otherworld friend. Finally, the old hermit got more comfortable gazing around at the instruments in curious wonder. The man's name had been Nemo. His body was made whole, and one day while touring the ship, he asked to see the book of changes to examine. No one must open this book until the time came for it to be opened and read by the prophesied one to deliver the surface dwellers to their homeland. It had been Bland that was sent to retrieve his father's broken body and to send it to the Crab Nebula back to the home planet. There, his family would repair the broken bones, replace the soul of Yormitz back into it, and then she would be able to communicate with him. She would not be able to travel back This is Fornell. She would not be able to travel back to their homeland until the mission was over, so Fornell felt that loss of his companionship. She wouldn't see him again until everything had come to pass. On this holy day, Bland wanted to do something for his mother. His grandmother suggested fresh fish that Fornell was so fond of. Bland had gone to the surface to what he called skim. He had made a contraption somewhat like a net with long prongs, and these prongs combed through the water where there was a school of fish, and enough were caught to feed the crew and all below. No matter how many times Shahzah thought about it, it was still all too amazing to take in sometimes. And now she was going to be a mother herself. Her people had been urban island dwellers who lived on the beaches and fished off the land poi poo for centuries. There had been many warnings of the disaster that befell them. Yellow sulfuric gases rose in the mornings, leaving a cloud hanging above the volcanic mountains. Small eruptions happened during the night, and it seemed as if the earth were growling its disapproval of all the wars around the world. They had been watching television news, and since that was all they heard about on the island, the tribe went to pray often at the shore, where they felt they were at one with God. Several hundred of her kin had fallen to the volcano generations ago. Now the sleeping giant was awakening again. Shahzah had never experienced this kind of rubbering in her lifetime, but the rest of the town was getting antsy. Some had begun to think that leaving their home and resettling would be better for them. The home of their ancestors was at risk, a lady geologist on one of the cruise ships had stated. She had come on her weekly tourism bus. Businesses wasn't so good anymore here since the rumbling started and the ground shook. She advised Shahzah to think about resettling too. It would get too dangerous as the quakes were becoming more frequent, she had said. Shahzah said she would think about it, and she would. There were rumors the tour bus route was about to change because of the lava stream crossing through the roads on one of the site areas. However, she hadn't heard anything else about it on the news, only more war declarations. On her family side of the island, the beautiful coves and caves of the island, beautiful waterfalls were once often a great attraction for the tourists. They made money off the small casinos in their cities, giving the native people revenue to keep them prosperous. They were a simple people living amongst nature as one. Fishing was great until about a year ago, when the gases started coming from below the surface. Several of her kin had gone beyond the barrier to fish, only to return to face lava that now was running into the sea on a daily basis. Many of her people had been trapped between the sea and lava flow, and when they ventured to the other side to fish, boats were often left tied for a hasty exit in case the mountain rumbling turned to something far worse. But where would they go? The next piece of land was 200 miles away. It was a remote in the Pacific Ocean, living on a volcanic island. The eruptions, or bubbling as her family now called it, were on the other side of the island where her mom's people were from. When nothing was heard from them, they would send a family member to go and make sure all was all right. Usually the uncles or aunts would gather, making a little getaway to Grandma's as a trip of it. But nothing had been heard from them, so they decided to call and make a trip. Nothing, just a message. The number you have reached has been temporarily disconnected. Her kinsmen on her father's side gathered, and off they went. Her uncles, father, mother, aunt, and grandfather got into a car and made the trip. A call from the police hours later revealed a creeping lava flow from that night, gassing, and consumed her family in their homes while they slept. The gases had presumably suffocated them before the lava even reached them. It was horrible. Shahzah had lost her mother and father and grandfather. Her uncle Rada was with an old girlfriend visiting because there wasn't enough room at grandmother's home. He had been spared. Shahzah was supposed to be getting married. She was betrothed to a man named Kazman. He was to be her husband and had stayed to get to know her family a while. He was staying with his family in the inn down at the beach a ways. He had graduated on the mainland where he attended college. Hers was a wedding arrangement. The family had agreed when they were children that they would go to school on the mainland, become an accountant, and get a job at the casino doing the books. That was what all the native families did, run the casinos that kept the revenues coming in. Her father had fished with Kazman's father as a boy, as well as her uncle Rada. But now her father was gone and wouldn't be able to give her away at the wedding. Shahzah mourned her mother and father day and night while the rumbling had killed them. Continued to get worse. A boom had occurred this morning, and the mountain looked as if it were glowing even brighter that evening. Every day the massive explosions echoed throughout the island, and people were leaving, moving to the mainland. One day her uncle Rada asked if she wanted to get away for a little while. He was going fishing and to say prayers for the family by the sea. Small puffs of smoke and ash grew and rose up in places between the pumice that cooled in the cove. Rada had become her rock over the last few weeks. He was concerned over her withdrawal from other tribe members and her betrothed's family. They all knew she grieved and worried she might not be eating right by herself, so Rada did his best to ease their conscience. But they weren't satisfied until Kazman's mother came to make sure. She wasn't going to neglect Shahzah after she had lost her blood mother. It was only natural for her to come to her from time to time and spend the nights there with her. She had lost some weight, but all in all, she was faring very well. Rada laughed at Shahzah behind the future mother-in-law's back. He called her Mama Busybody and asked Shahzah if perhaps Kazman was a mama's boy when she went home the next day. Still, the low rumbling could be heard from the mountain. They set out to go fishing, hopping into a black Jeep parked outside the front door of the house. The rumbling continued as they pulled away from the house. That evening, while sitting around a small campfire on the beach, Shahzah and Rada heard small pops from the volcano that were as they were looking up at the stars in the universe. As they camped there, they slept cautiously through the night. Shahzah awoke to the sunlight disturbing her eyes, spilling through a crack in the tent flap. It was quiet enough for the waves rolling in from the surf. Rada must be casting his nest for fish, she thought. She said her morning thank you to God for sparing them through the night and got up to pack the tents, leaving the cooking gear if Rada had some luck. They were leaving in the afternoon, he had said. And as much as he loved the living with nature and fishing, he had only taken 2 vacation days from his job at the casino. Shahzah worked diligently and quickly. She would spend time walking along the shore to look for seashells. She had been collecting shells from the time she was a little girl. She had done so every time they went fishing, or when the family had reunions, or just gatherings at the beach or celebrations. She picked up some of the supplies after carefully picking through the gear and turned to see her uncle on the slope of a jetty just down the beach. It extended about a quarter mile out, and the water was a gorgeous azure blue from where he stood. He looked up and waved at her from a distance. She responded with one back, pointing to her feet and indicating she was going to the car. Halfway there, she felt the rumbling under her feet again, only this time it wasn't the volcano. It felt different, and she struggled to keep hold of the camping lamps in her hands. As she tumbled to the sand, she just managed to separate the glass globe as she fell, saving the shattering of it. She would hate to have to leaf through the sand to pick up glass. Another familiar rumbling started and lasted about 10 to 15 seconds before she rose to her feet again. Boy, she thought, one of these days this baby's gonna blow up this whole island and there won't be a trace of it left in the ocean. She made the trip from camp to the car 3 times. She walked out to the jetty a bit and yelled to Rada, "I'll be down the way to look for shells. Stretch my legs a bit." Rada held a big kingfish up and said, "Look how big this one is. You hungry?" "A little bit. I'll go to work up an appetite." "Good, you're gonna need one with this guy I caught," he yelled back. "I'll just fish a little longer, then head back to camp and cook them." Shahzah wandered over the dunes and rocks, picking up shells along the way. She spotted some small purple flowers in a tall grassy area and picked them. She kept walking, and after about 20 minutes, she knelt down to plant the flowers in some pretty shells she found in a heart. She drew it in the sand. She put her mother and father and brother's name in it and placed the handprint below them. She prayed for their peace in heaven and looked up to the sky. The sun was higher now, and it must be around noon, she thought. As she looked back down at the heart, her tears dropped into the heart. She visibly wept out loud, mourning until she was spent of the sadness, and her God let her mind feel at peace. She walked back to the car with her pert little chin held up high, putting away new shells for her collection at home. It would be good to get back to her bed again, she thought. The beach got a little cool this time of year at night, and she more than once in the middle of the night felt a bone-chilling ocean cold. She had brought her thermal blanket, but it wasn't warm enough. She didn't want her uncle to be concerned and cut his vacation time off, so she hadn't mentioned it to him. The ground began to shake and rumble again, this time a little stronger. The two of them both looked at each other at the same time. Rada gathered his balance and began packing his fishing gear. Shahzah was scared. Rada grabbed his bucket and pole and began to descend down to the jetty instead of trying to go back the same way he had come. As she shut the trunk of the car, she saw it. The lava had snaked its way toward the beginning of the jetty, cutting off her uncle's exit. It was urgent that he try and find a way off, for the lava was now edging towards him and making a steamy hissing. He had no boat and looked trapped, guessing it would be too tough to navigate between the lava. Now far on the rocky, jagged jetty, it looked hopeless. How could she have not seen this happening? She was so busy putting the things away, running back and forth, that the surf had made it hard for Rada to hear her. So she began running towards him. As she was running, though, she noticed that the shore was beginning to recede. Fish were left flapping, and Rada began to make his way along the rocky jetty, dropping his poles and yelling something to her. He half turned and pointed behind himself, and Shahzah looked at what he was pointing at, and she saw a rising of the sea. It was a ways off, but it was definitely rising about 50 feet, which meant that it was a tsunami. Oh my God. That strange quaking that had knocked her down 20 minutes ago had caused a tsunami, which was headed to their island home. Devastation was imminent. As she looked from the ocean to her uncle rapidly running, Throwing his bucket and poles aside, he made a mad dash for escape. "Run to high ground, Shahzah, run!" He stumbled over the sewage pipe that was now clearly visible to Shahzah as the water continued to disappear from the shore, ever rising behind in a momentum to smash the little island. Now they were running. Shahzah ran toward the car to get it started to get them out of there as far as they could before it hit. She turned to see how far her uncle was and was met with a brilliant light that was in front of the massive wave that was about 20 miles off the shore now, bearing down on the island. Rada, quarter of the way to go, but she could see the time he took to make it would surely be too late. "Oh, Rada, oh my God, help me." The bright light moved in and filled the skyline. You could see the ocean swell. A stairwell like an escalator descended out of the bottom. As the light swung around on Rada, she could see beings inside the craft. She looked for Rada. He was gone. "No," she thought. A tall, massive-built man reached his hand down to her with haste and worry in his eyes. Shahzah took it. The hatch of the craft closed quickly, and they sped up into the air just as the waves struck the island. "No," she screamed as her homeland disappeared before her eyes. 200-foot waves swept rocks, trees, building debris as it covered the entire island in seconds. With the volcano submerged in the ocean, the buildup of lava caused the volcano to erupt. Boom, boom, boom. Smoke and hot ash rose in the sky from where the island once sat. Boom, boom, another massive explosion. More smoke, fire, and ash. Nothing was able to withstand that force of nature. Gone. All of them, she thought wearily. Why? Why, God? Why? Where were they going? What was she going to do? She felt hopeless and grateful to God at the same time that she had made it. Her emotions were running wild in her mind. The being was saying something, only his mouth wasn't moving. What was that? She couldn't comprehend. And hearing was a faint echo as she surrendered to her pain and went limp. Things went dark as she fainted in shock.